Shankardeep Ghosh, with Islamic atrocities on the rise and with evangelical conversion targeting Hindus on the rise, why is central government not bringing enough management to stop and reverse this attack on India? Uh, Panditji, I think right up your street.
So how controversial can we be? Let's have a look. It's not possible to enforce legislation which is based on equality unless the judiciary and indeed the state mechanisms for enforcing legislation are up to scratch. And we have always had a difficulty in that particular area. If you pass laws but you can't follow them up, if you've got a wonderful constitution but you can't see that even its good aspects are applied and made a substance and reality in people's lives, then it's very, very hard to do. I think there is such an important need for India to have its own civilizational ethos in law. And so, how we haven't had any great improvements on this for the last 8 or 9 years. I would go as far as to saying that we need to have a president who is the head of the judiciary as being a figure who would send fear through the very veins of the judiciary, a character who would be so already established in his capacity to wreak havoc if somebody is not behaving properly and according to law, should be made the president. I would go as far as to even suggest that somebody of the caliber of Dr. Subramanian Swamy, who strikes fear into the heart of both criminals, crooks, politicians, and members of the judiciary, should be plonked into position as president and let him have free rein on sorting out this college, which doesn't seem to want to evolve. And it certainly seems to be less inclined to serve the needs of the Bharatiya civilization on a daily basis. Without the legal backing, without the law justifying the use of force, it's very, very difficult to make any changes. Jiski lati bhain becomes the rule of the day, and we're seeing that in too many instances. The violence in Bengal is a demonstration of the lack of respect for law. The violence against Hindus again and again, Balghar, the Sadhus, etc. These are all because of an incredible lack of respect for the authority of the law. That is the number one priority. Once that's in place, everything else can be brought into line.
Right. Next one. Shankardeep Ghosh again. Why is Modi government not doing enough to curb the criminals on state levels? Maharashtra, Bengal, etc. Why are politician criminals roaming free? I think this was taken care of in the first question itself. So I'll let it pass and we'll move to the next one. Reena Sukhdev, Jai Shri Krishna. My concern is with Modi's ministers. They've disappeared and not coming as strong. Everything is falling on Modi. Can we create a rating for them? Rating expert, Vibhuti Ji?
I believe in performance, but at this point in time, it is also the communication issue. Because, Prime Minister, in my opinion, I would say that while the entire responsibility rests with him, he could make his own life easier by asking all the ministers to take responsibilities for what happens in their domain. Prime Minister doesn't have to be addressing every single concern, doesn't have to be answering to anybody all the time, everybody all the time. So, ministers play a safe game. That's a classic mentality of bureaucracy or politicians. They play the safe game. All that you need to do is to watch the hilarious Yes Minister and Yes Prime Minister series. You would know that how honorable bureaucrats control the ministers in more ways than one. So that's what is important. And rating ke liye kya karna hai? If Javadekar still continues there, do you need a rating system? I mean, that's what I'm trying to say here. So what rating system?
I think I should say Reena ji needs to blame the person who puts these ministers in place rather than the ministers themselves in that case.
Thank you.
Next. Chetan Sharma, the value of Bharatiya civilization has always depended on our culture, society. It was never state institutional driven. But how should we institutionalize our dharma as it is need of the hour? Panditji.
Well, I've had this conversation and this discussion with many people, especially youngsters in diaspora communities. How do we preserve and how do we expand? How do we strengthen our vision of Dharma? And I always say that people understand the power of Dharma. It took one Swami Vivekananda to redirect the whole civilizational and religious life of the United States of America. Just the one. And that's because what we articulate and what we say is actually so healthy and beneficial for anybody who listens, word by word, sentence by sentence. All of a sudden, it's almost like we are in possession of the antivirus to every human disease and condition. And all we have to do is to be able to become skillful in articulating and saying it. There is one side to this, and that is that if we want the next generation to be fully empowered with the Shakti that Sri Krishnaji was able to give to Arjun, as parents, we need to be able to master it first. We need to have the capacity to live it, to speak it, to be able to build our own lives on it. And then by example, other people will follow. If enough of us are doing that, then the shift changes. Tragically, what we're seeing too much of is that those who could make these seismic shifts often talk, but they don't do. I look, where are our noble dharmic voices? Where are the people who stand tall, proud, and who command respect when they enter a room? There are so few of them about, and we need them to step forward and to start making it apparent that actually the Hindu is a noble creature, that a person who establishes his life on Sanatan Dharma is human nobility, and that will happen. But we have to start imbibing it in what we are, who we are, what we say, what we do at every step. That's all that's required. Then Dharma really does serve those who serve it.
Right. Next one. Do you think, Ashutosh, do you think the only way to get rid of our inferiority complex is to be successful in what the West has given us without compromising on our culture like Japan and also have a strong economy?
I
Vibhuti.
think the strong economy is a must. Otherwise, nobody listens to you. If you're going around with a begging bowl and then preaching spirituality, trust me, nobody is going to listen to you. But it's only when Panditji said earlier on, and I still believe that regardless of everything else, जिसकी लाठी उसकी भैंस अभी भी चलती है. So the question here is that you can't wield a lathi if you're not strong enough, if you don't have strong arms, if you are not well fed. So if you want others to listen to you, you have to show your might, economic might, political might, and everything else. But the might comes from economics. China's might today is a lesson for the rest of the world, and particularly India. That China derives all its sovereign funds, the political clout, the force, for all its nonsense that it does on the world global platform, that it's coming out of the money in their pocket. They have virtually bought countries. So think about it. They are able to enforce their killer contracts. It comes from there. We don't have to compromise with our philosophy, but we don't have to be like West. We have to be us. And that's important. For being us and exerting our influence, we need economic strength. There is no doubt about that.
Right. Next one.
I know I can just add one small thing, and that is that we, economically, we are not a consumption-based society. We are taught about tyag, that you can experience the highest level of anand through tyag and through service to the earth and service of everything else. The West is looking for that same anand, but they're looking for it from a point of view of consuming material in ever-increasing quantities. So we need to establish our economic model on those lines, and we will be successful. It's a fundamental difference between the way in which the two mindsets work.
Yeah. Okay. Next one. Ekalav is saying we expect more from Modi ji because we feel awakened, which is Modi ji's greatest achievement. A lot of credit in front of people like the three of you, but we didn't see anything like JED before 2014. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Indeed. Thank you, Gloviji.
Dr. Deepak Guru Shri Vibhuti sir made very important point in CAA, farm laws, or any other initiative there has been considerable communication gap from government side. Yes,
Thank you.
communication with Sri Javadekar being around, I think. But then why blame Javadekar? I mean, somebody removed Smriti Irani from that position and brought Javadekar in. Why blame Javadekar? He's there for a
It's a
design, I guess, and
lesson.
for a purpose.
It's a lesson we have to learn that just because something is good for everyone doesn't mean that it will be popular with everyone. It doesn't mean that it will be understood by everyone. And I had a little slide earlier on just referring to the fact that in building a narrative and a consensus is so important. Somebody like Tony Blair took the United Kingdom to war by making a consensus, by making a simple remark that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction which could destroy us in 45 minutes. And the country went to war. And he is not a war criminal. He is still free on the streets. That's the power of consensus. That's the power of narrative. And that's the power of communication. And yet we have something potentially so revolutionary in the farm law ideas, and yet we didn't manage to communicate it very well. So there's work to be done there.
Okay, next. The negatives of Modi government makes it hard to think it as a Hindu party. All parties are now managed and influenced by the left ecosystem. It's time Hindus unite. I think
Good
Vibhuti ji
point.
would agree.
I just wanted to say, totally agree, and
I
just
would make a
wanted to
gentle
add one
contribution. I always-
sentence here.
Yeah.
Add one simple thing here. Just bear in mind that unity is not a product or a book available on a bookshelf or in a factory inventory or assembly line. Unity is always behind a purpose, a cause. If you feel Patriot Hindu One, if you feel that it's time for Hindus to unite, make that as a cause celebre. Make that as your mission. कि हमें unite होना है because we are under threat, because whatever. So go ahead. That's the way to go. I like your thought. It's time Hindus unite. But the next question would be, behind a purpose, to do what? Then you create a unity. Just putting 10 sticks together, you bring them together, but you have to create unity behind a purpose. Bear in mind, I repeat, it's not a product available on the shelf, nor is it a shirt that you wear and you are united now. It doesn't happen like that.
Next. Siddharth Shekhar, the Indian Foreign Service and the bureaucracy is leftist. That's the problem. They have a vested interest in maintaining this narrative. Well, as a former bureaucrat, I would say that the bureaucracy and the Indian Foreign Service are basically status quoist. So if the status quo ante is left, then they will maintain that. And it is not their responsibility to change it, it is the responsibility of the government in power to change it. The status quo is never changed by the bureaucracy. The bureaucracy, by definition, is the upholder of the status quo. Oh, I think we are barking up the wrong tree. Do you agree, the two gentlemen?
I think people should remember that change is happening faster than ever before. And we had one Meghan Markle made one remark about racism in the royal family, and it shook the British establishment. Suddenly, everybody was looking at them with scrutiny that had never existed before. So everyone, please have some confidence that if we all get involved and we all start to do small things, make a small change, a contribution, it will have an incredible impact. Don't lose heart. Just join in and support the government in whatever they're doing.
Yes, in fact, I just add for effect what Alapan Bandopadhyay, the outgoing Chief Secretary of West Bengal, did. I can guarantee you that about, if not 99, but in 95% cases, every bureaucrat would do the same. Next. Mithilesh Kumar, Mr. Jha is right about improving foreign service. Indian embassy, consulate need to manage narratives in foreign countries in a better way, but they need to be given confidence. If they have to keep looking over their shoulder all the time, then they're not going to do anything. That's the
That is the legacy of as many years. Thank you, Mithilesh.
Yeah.
Next. Dr. Rohit Jairaj Singh, I never call first five education ministers as Muslim. I call them pro-Pakistani, highly fundamentalist mullahs. Don't call them pro-Pakistani. They were pro-Ummat. Abul Kalam Azad was never for Pakistan, but he was very much for the Ummat, the pan-Islamist community. Next. Krishna Rao, do you think we don't have substance and salience, like we can't define who is a Hindu, non-Hindu, and hence slogans like Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam just because delusional slogans or mantras? Panaji.
Well, I think that's a great segue into a slightly deeper understanding. I said, look at the word independence. We all assume it to be right, and yet when you look underneath it, it's complete nonsense. If you look at Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, does it withstand scrutiny? Clearly, there's something missing. If you look at Dharmo Rakshati Rakshita, it doesn't withstand scrutiny. There is something missing. We have an incomplete grasp, and for too long, we have been accepting slogans as reality. I have a dear friend who translated Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. He said that if I look at the reality, it's Vasudhaiva Stupiditum. And I often think of that when people mention Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. And remember, we are a nation and a civilization who build our existence on Satya. Satya, the pursuit of Satya, the acceptance that Satya is the bedrock upon which we build, is the best mantra. Every mantra has to sit on what is real. Every mantra has to support what is real. If it isn't, then that's what Maya and Mithya is. As a civilization, I think that's also part of our decolonization. Satya is indeed what is going to give us life and rejuvenation.
That's right. And just as your friend said, that Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam is Vasudhaiva is to Puritan, I think this is something that has already been said by somebody who composed the Hitopadesh.
That's correct.
It is not clear. It's about,
That's correct.
I think people put it between 5th century and 9th century somewhere. But it's very much there, that Hitopadesh story about the deer, Chitrangan, and the jackal, Durbuddhi or Shudra Buddhi. That has been said more than a millennia ago, but people don't know about it. I've done quite a few episodes on that.
When your survival is threatened, don't be confused by Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, I believe was the original expression.
Exactly. Next. Ekala was saying, my mom and wife discourage me about my Facebook and Twitter posts every day by saying, Log kya kahenge? Sab log kya kahenge? Modi ji needs to do what I do. I don't bother. Oh yes, we also shouldn't bother about saying the right thing. Sharat Chandra, Jai Shri Krishna, if I have so much of negative narrative, how can we become world power and sustain? Can't we just ignore this narrative by saying, Karam karte jao, phal ki chindana mat karo. Phal ki jana. Even this Karmanya Vadikaraste is also actually understood in a very, very wrong fashion.
It's true. Oh my goodness.
It says,
it doesn't matter.
Let me explain it from my perspective.
Ji.
It does not say phal ki asha mat karo. It says कि फल पर आपका अधिकार नहीं है. These are two entirely different perspectives. You have to do what is called sakam karma. It is not it is sakam karma. But you don't have a right to the phal. That's what it says. But please understand it in the proper perspective. Balaji, you were saying something.
I was saying the handbrake in a car, its job is to be applied or to be released. It has no intention or no control over where the vehicle is going to go. That's other parts and other missions and other ideologies dictate where the vehicle is going to go. But the handbrake has to do its job. And that's all it has to do. And it's the same with us. We have to fulfill our role and leave the journey and the destination and the guide to the bigger picture. We should be committed, and that's all.
Okay. That's another point of view. Uh, as much as I know Modi, Siddharth Shekhar, he knows what's wrong and what should be done, but for some reason he's not doing it. Is it what I call the VAL syndrome, validation and approval from the left?
If I
that's
can,
what
if I can,
that's
if I
that's
can
what
just
we talked
remind.
about, that
Mm,
our
mm.
desire to seek validation and approval is the killer. We are constantly worried about what the society will say, who will say what. But if you are on the path of dharma, then you don't worry for the outcome from that perspective. Because intuitionally, instinctively, intellectually, we always know when we are doing the right thing and when we are doing the wrong thing. We always know that. Let's not delude, let's not undermine ourselves by giving less credit. We know when we are doing the right thing. So if
Next.
you're doing the right thing,
You
then
know,
there's nothing to worry about.
mm, this is a personal thing, isn't it? It's about personality. It's about one's own emotional build-up and so on. And I often think back to when Prime Minister Modi was here in London, and he was at Wembley. I was at Wembley, and I saw David Cameron introduce him to the audience. And we were watching, and there was absolutely no weakness, no inferiority. It was confidence. It was, I know who I am. I know why I'm here. I'm bigger than this event. I'm here to do some unbelievable work. It was exuding from Prime Minister Modi when he spoke to the British Parliament. The whole of the Parliament was sitting there, MPs, Lords, and he again was supremely confident, and there was no aspect of inferiority. So I don't think that's an issue. I don't think that's the problem. I think the problems are systemic. I think the problems are that we do not have an infrastructure in place which can carry out his mission and his vision fast enough. And it's rectifying those defects where I think the biggest stumbling blocks are. I don't think at the top, certainly not with our Prime Minister, that we have this issue of inferiority.
Right. Next one. Vibhuti Ji, was the future of taking on bad karma in Bengal of taking in tainted leaders when there was clear possibility of taking the TMC down around 4 years ago?
It was pure bad decision making. One of the key things for leadership is who you make your allies, who are your compatriots. And, obviously it seems that tainted leaders were a bad decision, but I would put it in a different way about the Bengal defeat, since it is talked about as a defeat, is that BJP increased its number from 3 to 77 or 80 or whatever it is. I think Prime Minister Modi lost the battle of expectation there because there were a lot of reporting that he was going to win handsomely. It didn't happen. What interestingly happened was that many other parties disappeared. So it's virtually a two-party game in West Bengal. I am totally against the violence that has happened. That is something the Prime Minister needed to come out aggressively on that, because you cannot allow violence against innocent people. And the way the BJP Karyakartas were beaten up, murdered, and insulted, that was the responsibility of the ruling party to make sure it didn't happen. If it happened, then take action.
Well, that's still continuing, by the way.
Yeah.
And I am hosting Tathagat Roy Ji tomorrow at 5 p.m. Indian Standard Time on exactly the same issue. Next, Rahul Gandhi. Ah, wonderful. Pappu Ji, आपका स्वागत. Modi ji aim is bringing Ram Raj kingdom of God. He is born for this task. God has given him all resources to do it. ये आपको क्या हो गया राहुल गांधी जी?
Oh dear, thank you for that. That was enjoyable without any further elaboration. You
Yes.
know, I was reading about the Trojan horse in Greek history, and it struck me that we think of Congress as being a party which wants the good of Bharat and everything else, but in fact it's a classic Trojan horse, isn't it? It was inserted, it was left behind when the British left, and it was filled with people who were
Exactly.
carrying bad intentions and knives. And over the years, as a Trojan horse, it has really fulfilled what its purpose was. It's extracted resources, it's hindered the evolution and the return to full health of a whole nation. That is a classic Trojan horse. I was just reminded by the appearance of Mr. Rahul Gandhi, because I think he's doing a brilliant job as a Trojan horse, and we're mistaken in judging him as a politician when really he is the court jester who is laughing all the way to the bank.
Well, very well put. I think that will be the quotable quote of the day. If I might just add that yesterday we had this gentleman, Bhau Torsekar. He's a great journalist, and he's really down to earth, but he's very, very popular. And he said something which was very, very classy. He said that, everybody expects Rahul Gandhi to do what he does. If tomorrow, if Rahul Gandhi were to start praising Narendra Modi, then Narendra Modi would be completely out of wits, and he would not know what to do. So that's
I remember Dr. Swami said the same thing. He said, no, if India's going to thrive, we have to keep Rahul Gandhi in office for as long as possible.
It's so predictable. Next. Pram. Secular education has done damage to Hindu culture. Should we have 3 educational systems of gurukuls, convents, and madrasas rather than present status? Well, the way I think we can thank Wuhan virus for once. I think we are going back to the ancient systems, and everything is going to be virtual, and then you can have your pick. I think Gurukul system can thrive in such a scenario.
But I do think that funding for these educational institutions needs to be either on a completely level playing field, or no institution should receive state funding at all. We have the worst of everything at the moment.
Yeah,
you're right.
totally.
But these funded institutions are going to wither away. Siddharth Shekhar, so 90% of the senior IAS officers I have met are leftist, the Delhiites, St. Stephen College type. I was just talking to a retired ACS, a complete leftist. Is not the exception, but the norm. I'll tell you again, we bureaucrats are status quo. That's what I said. And if you met an ACS, he probably got into the service in around mid-80s. And he was educated in the same manner. And he decided not to change. He decided to maintain his status quo. That's how he remains a leftist. And probably you're looking at me and thinking what happened to me. So, exceptions only prove the rule. So don't worry about that.
There are people out there who have looked at the whole of the population of Bharat and said, we have to convert their mindset. We have to completely flip them from a dharmic view to an Abrahamic view. And they're confident and they're persistent. Why can't we adopt the same attitude? I would love to spend so much time with left-leaning atheists or the remnants of a Macaulayite identity project. I would love to spend time with them because they're not complicated people. They need to be loved, they need a bit of affection, and they need to gently be weaned off these prejudices which are deep in their psyche. They have sanskar. Our tradition is wonderful at getting rid of sanskar, isn't it?
And to add to that, I would say that, sorry, Sanjay, just last thought of mine. I would say that we must begin to inquire and ask them. We have to confront them in a dialogue. I mean, we are debate masters. So let's kind of go back to our tradition of Vad, Vivad, Tark, everything with them. As soon like I do that with my Baptist Christian friends. I said, do you really have freedom of religion? If you say Jesus is the only way, that means you are not giving my Krishna any chance. So, if you are happy with that way, so be it. Leave me alone. And unless and until we begin to adopt an approach like that, then what I read long time ago will be that India has become a happy hunting ground for anybody and everybody. Even Barkha is hunting in India with impunity, virtually. Like look at General's book today about Kargil war, and now what she's doing in hospital, what she does in burning grounds, things like that. India is a happy hunting ground, and yet there will be an index on which India is low down on freedom of press index. Beats me. if we can't contest that, it's our fault.
Yeah, but I would say it's not difficult converting the youth. The question is about a die-hard bureaucrat who spent 35, 40 years in the bureaucracy.
Yes.
Try converting him. I do it all the time, and I do not succeed. Let me admit that.
But one thing which
You
I
have to
know,
use.
Bihar
You have
experience.
to.
Even IS
Yeah.
officers go to a tantric's office to get a good posting, by the way.
And a BBC World Service accent always helps.
Okay. Too late for us to put that on. How about we make Yogi ji PM, Himanta Biswa ji the CJI? How can he become the CJI? Just because he has a law degree. Even I have a law degree. So why didn't you think of me? अगर कोई स्वर्ग है तो ऐसा ही होता होगा. चलिए साहब, आप स्वर्ग में रहिए, हम आगे चलते हैं. Vijender, would regulation over NGOs by FCRA count as narrative building indirectly, as foreign funded NGOs have a significant role in narrative setting? Well, yes, sort of, but not enough, I would say.
That would be covert, wouldn't it? Whereas it needs to be overt, really. Now we
Yeah,
need to be able
narrative building
to.
is overt. You're quite
Yes,
right.
completely.
Next. Vijender, BJP did try to shine the light on Savarkar, Bose, Sardar Patel, Yogi Maharaj pays tributes to national heroes like Shivaji, Guru Gobind Singh outside and state boundaries. Also, UGC draft syllabus. Thoughts on these? Yes, things have happened, things have moved, but just too slowly.
Yeah. The narrative outside in the diaspora is changing. There was a time when you couldn't say Savarkar's name without being frowned upon and sort of shunned and having no more dinner invitations come to you. But that's changing now. Similarly with Bose and even Godse. Godse is beginning to become rehabilitated in the mind of his place in history. So much is changing. Sardar Patel, the Statue of Liberty, massive narrative symbol.
Right. Okay, Rakeshwari Panditji, your book, Caste Conversions, did not add to the earth's weight. It lifted off the weight of ignorance. Please write more. Do you blog? I looked, but I couldn't find one.
Rakeshji, that's very kind of you, very generous of you. All I would suggest is that if you want to get in touch, then the best place is probably to just look me up on the British Hindu on Twitter, and you'll be able to find all of my connections there.
Right, next one. Deepak Guru. So when PM was asked many years ago why he stays silent when some BJP MPs speak nonsense, he said he acts against them privately, not in public domain. Can we assume the same now as well?
Your
Only he knows.
guess is as good as mine.
Exactly. You don't know. Next. CE. It's great to see all three. Sabka Saath strategy could be similar to PM extending hand to Pakistan in 2014 to establish that he's genuinely trying to consider everybody equal. But see Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Bengal, Assam, Rajasthan, everywhere Muslim community is working against law of land. What's the surprise? That's what I documented in my book. With support of political opposition parties. Now he'll come hard on them. We're hoping for many months now. Time now seems to be ripening. Your comment, Vibhuti Ji.
Well, your question with a long statement definitely is praying for an action. And, given Modi ji is a karmyogi, he will have to find a way, and he will find a way. There are times when a few things take time to happen. Just as proving a criminal case is very, very tough. The justice system in democracy is always in the favor of accused, that you are not guilty until proven. So even the killer walks free for element of doubt instilled by the jury system or the judiciary system. So I would say there will be action, there will be something, but to what extent I do not know, whether it's effective or enough or not. That's a doubt which we have, and that people need to feel assured that dharma will not get away unpunished.
Okay, next. Nitilesh Kumar, Vibhuti Ji's suggestion of communication is very important. PM needs to present government action and plans with facts and figures. US White House or New York governor can be taken as example.
I would not take US White House or NY governor as an example because he gave all bogus data and won Emmy award. There is a law case going against him on that. So I would not take that as an example. And I would not take US president. I would say the methodology. Methodology, yes, not the way they do it. But there is a process here. That's a process. How do you take advantage of that in politics? In your system, in India's system, that prime minister needs to devise that. Yes, you have to, but you can't share everything as well. Transparency also has its limitations.
I'm so looking forward to this state television channel that's being talked about,
Right.
because the bandwidth at the moment is all occupied by foreign actors or YouTubers and people who are small media centers. But the moment we get something as substantial as a state television channel, that will be phenomenal. It should suck so much bandwidth from all of the opposition. It should become the vehicle through which the government can actually take Mann Ki Baat to its next level. And then we should have many of these criticisms addressed and met and overcome. I think one thing is that we're also getting a little bit jaded now. You know, when Mann Ki Baat came out and there were so many other initiatives, we've become accustomed to having all of these things and treating them as normal. It was extraordinary for a prime minister to be speaking to the population in the manner in which he does and has done. He set a new precedent, but we do need it to move now on to the next level, which means Doordarshan International or whatever it's going to be should be superb, and they should really have a top quality anchors and genuine, solid, investigative journalism, and not so much of the shouting and things that go on in commercial debates sometimes.
Right.
And they are now reduced to joker shows, actually.
Yeah.
Next, Krishna Sundar, according to 2011 census, while Brits are a minority in 22 out of 32 boroughs in London, is demographic transformation of London the main reason for Sadiq Khan's victory?
So I look at, since it's my backyard, I look at this development from the point of view of philosophies. Remember, the left are believers, and you can indoctrinate believers
I think we just lost him for a bit.
I think he will come back.
Yeah, he
is
should
filled
come
with
back.
the left
Okay.
as well. And all that's happened every time is that they come into force, they come into power and support Sadiq, who is the darling of the extreme left. So its transformation of London is not a good thing. It's moving in a direction which is very, very unpleasant. We have had a spike in knife crime in the last month or so. Even only yesterday, there were some very violent scenes. And the spreading the leadership, I don't know whether you've heard the news, but today, the Chief Constable, Cressida Dick, who is the person in charge of the police, the Commissioner of Police, she has requested Priti Patel to give her powers to be able to discriminate against the domestic white population in her recruitment. Because law prevents her from saying, I want to have more black officers because they're black, more brown officers because they're brown, more LGBT, etc. She wants to introduce selection on the basis of identity, as opposed to selection on the basis of suitability. And that's another sign of what's happening in London. There is a decline, but I think the backdrop to it is an increasing level of dissatisfaction. And so when the two sort of meet, then there is a solid, robust engagement, and one will come out on top. But I think until our dear friends in the Labour Party get their act together, we're not going to see an improvement in the situation in London.
Krishna Sundar Panditji, why are EU nationals allowed to vote in local elections even though the UK is not part of the EU?
I don't think they are anymore. I stand to be corrected, but I think with the the European Union and the Schengen arrangements for travel and the European Economic Community relationships, it was feasible and possible. But I don't think that's the case anymore.
Next. What Mr. Modi, Mithilesh Kumar, what Mr. Modi has done to Bengal Chief Secretary, could the same not be done for DMs and SPs of violence affected districts? By the way, what has he done? I mean, if you think it's something very big has been done, actually nothing's been done. So how does it matter if one gets transferred from one place to another? It doesn't matter. I think this whole action, it doesn't impress anyone. I can tell you as a former bureaucrat.
And it gives no solace to the victims and their families.
Exactly. Ekla was saying, tonight's is a truly enlightening show, case study for Aaj Tak on how to conduct real debates and dialogues.
Thank you.
We are watching. We are trying to learn from Aaj Tak in fact. How to
वो आज तक नहीं सीखे,
abuse
वो
each other.
आज तक नहीं सीखे.
Next.
With due respect.
Siddharth Shekhar, this retired ACS, is 80-year-old and came to India as a child from Sindh after seeing Hindus massacred, and he said Hindus tede hote hain, Muslims seedhe hote hain. I was literally speechless. I tell you, I try this on everyday basis. I must have got almost many thousands of youngsters on my side, but I doubt if I can count even one bureaucrat of my seniority and in that band I'm talking about. Next.
It's very difficult to change one's opinion when one's whole life has been constructed on the validity and belief in that opinion, isn't it? It must be a terrible moment when you get to such a senior age and then look back and realize that perhaps you have been wrong. Very few people will make that step.
Yeah, especially a bureaucrat who is used to always telling other people that he's right.
Yeah, yeah.
Next. Mithilesh Kumar, my comment on communication was about methodology of White House and NY governor and not personalities. Lack of it has attracted flack for Modi on vaccination despite good rate of vaccination.
Mithilesh, I totally understood your question. That's why we talked about the process. And I was literally joking about the personality. So I hope you take it in the same spirit that I took it in. Thank you.
I would say though, there is a seriousness. I mean, we've seen how quickly the United Kingdom started to speak about the Indian variant,
Right.
where they hadn't spoken about the Chinese variant.
Right.
And in fact, there is now some sort of connection between the Punjabi community who went from the United Kingdom to support the farmers issue, taking a UK variant with them. But nobody is talking about the UK variant at all. And that's about narrative setting. So the systems, the methodology are vital, but we need the assertiveness to be able to push the right message into these systems as well. I think that is
equally important is that nobody will call it a UK variant or a Punjabi variant or a Khalsa variant at all. But they will happily say that he went without and came back with Indian variant.
It's a very shallow play on words, but the comedians are now talking about the Punjab, using the play on words of the jab being the injection and Punjab being the Indian aspect, and the comedians are joking, say, "Oh, have you had the Punjab?" It's the narrative.
Next. Okay, so we come to the end of the episode with all the questions taken and addressed. Thank you so much, Panditji, as enlightening as always, including some great takeaways, which we shall be putting in our clips. Thank you, Vibhuti Ji. Wonderful session.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you. Jai Hind, Vande Mataram.
Jai Hind, Vande Mataram.
Jai Hind.